baby, it's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm going back to how my career started. I'm dropping back into the forgotten world of rollerblading. My guest is the first professional athlete that I ever worked with during my time manning a desk at K2. I'm talking about Cesar Mora, and if you don't know about Cesar, he was a champion inline skater when there was such a thing as champion inline skaters. He was the first guy to land a 1080 in competition. I think he was the first to land a 1260 as well. He dominated the 90s and was one of the most professional athletes that I've ever worked with. The dude had his own website that he was updating daily in 2002, which says a lot for what he thought about his career. On the podcast, Cesar and I talk about what he was supposed to do, play professional soccer, and how his path changed based on visas and partying, and then how he got a second chance with inline skating. And then, like I do with all inline skaters, I'll find out what Cesar is up to now. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to tell someone about the show. It can be anybody. I don't care if they're your friends or not. I also want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. And finally, I need to thank my sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Spy Optic, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's head down under and talk with Cesar Mora. Cesar.
Mikey. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. I was just thinking it's been probably, 12 years since we've talked? Maybe more?
Probably more. It's been a while. It's gone quick.
Yeah, man, it's just crazy how time's flown. But I guess I can start it off with you and I have a long history. And I can say in that history, I probably missed the prime of your career. And you missed the prime of my career. You got the beginning of my career when I started working with athletes. And I'd say you were the first athlete I met on the team. And do you remember what happened the first time you and I met?
We were driving around Anaheim, Orange County.
We had a contest in Anaheim. And I was arranging for you, Sean Robertson, and Kelly Matthews to come to California, and then we'd meet up for the first time in person.
Yeah, I remember some of that, yeah.
I always think back to it, and when I tell people stories about team management, I always bring that up as like, man, this guy Cesar was on a flight for like 20 hours. He gets to the airport. I don't know where the car is, so he can't put his bags in it. Takes me like 3 hours to find the car. He has 4 hours to kill at the airport. And he's got to be less than pleased, and that's like his introduction to me.
No. Usually when you come off of a flight that long, you don't really have much to say. You're kind of knocked out and you just cruise along. So I don't think it was anything personal with you. But I do remember that. Probably blame K2, not you. They did that to me a few times, actually. In 99, they sent me, when we had it in Fort Myers in Florida, they sent me to Orlando. They sent me to the wrong airport, so I caught a 4-hour limousine to the event.
That was back in the money days.
That was 99, that one.
Yeah, so that was in the height of it. I thought you were going to hopefully remember that, and it was going to be the most miserable experience of your life, and we could talk about it, but I guess that's not the case.
No, see? It wasn't that miserable. I wasn't thinking that at all. I was probably just tired.
Yeah, well, in doing this podcast, I realized I learned a lot about you that I didn't know about you back then, but it all starts for you in Madrid, Spain, right?
Yeah, I was born in Madrid, about 3 minutes from the Real Madrid stadium. And then as a baby, my parents moved to Australia, and that's where I grew up. They had my sister there a year or so later, and I just grew up in Australia. Went back to Spain when I was 10 for about 2 years. Came back to Australia because I just missed it. Have you been to Australia?
I've never been to Australia, no.
Madrid was there's no beaches, no open parks. Everything's very closed in, very populated. Australia is just full of beaches and open parks and open fresh air and spaces. So I kind of grew up with that and I was missing it. So yeah, we came back to Australia when I was about 13.
And what did your parents do growing up?
Well, they got married just before they had me. They came to Australia. My mum learned English very quickly. She became an English teacher and also did secretarial work and whatever. My dad was a handyman. He was a painter. He just taught himself how to like fix things and paint things and just make a living in a country where he didn't know the language.
Are they really good at anything? Because you're like a super talented athlete in a lot of different fields, and do your parents have skills in areas like that?
Look, my mum was a good drawer and she was pretty fast. And my dad's just great genetics physically. Yeah, I think he did gymnastics when he was younger. And I mean, he grew up poor and everything, but he was just a natural athlete.
And do they get you right into soccer right away when you're a kid?
No, they didn't get me into soccer at all. I think I was 5 years old at Ramsgate Primary School, and a note came around to all the classes. There will be soccer tryouts or something in the afternoon. I never kicked the ball, never even cared about it. And I said, I'll do that, I can do that. Because I just thought I could do everything. And I went, and I liked it. And I got good pretty quickly. I got good and I loved it, and it just became my passion.
Based on the internet videos of you juggling and just some of the skills that you have with a soccer ball, you must have spent hours upon hours upon hours as a kid, just you and the soccer ball, I would think.
Yeah, I loved it. I'd get those cheap soccer balls and bash them against the wall for hours, try to learn new ways of kicking it, new ways of keeping the ball up. When I was younger, about 10, I did this McDonald's Socceroo Super Skills thing, and I won a few awards doing that. I just loved it. My parents never pushed me to do anything. I would drag them, more like it. So my dad, he saw that I was like pretty good and said, I better learn what this is all about. And he started getting into coaching and got high graded in coaching, and he started learning different tactics outside the box to teach me. I've been coached by Australian coaches, national team coaches, Olympic coaches, and my dad's been my best coach that I've ever had.
Is that just because he knew you better than everybody else and how to motivate you?
No, actually, that worked against him because I would never do what he said, and I would always try to rebel. You know, I was only a small kid. I've always been small, and you're playing against, monster kids that just bully you. So there was a game I remember I came off crying because they kept bowling me over and getting the ball off me. He goes, because you're running with them, and they're bigger than you. Stop the ball and then go again, and stop the ball and go again. A smaller player is more agile than a bigger player. So that's how I started working out my dribbling, and he'd force me to like shoot with my left, learn how to control the ball on my chest. And this is all very young. He'd give me like a penny if I could hit the ball under a chair from 20 meters away, or just little things like that. Never the normal way of seeing how to play a game. So yeah, he taught me a lot, even though I didn't want to admit it when I was younger. He's always been my best coach.
When does soccer start getting serious for you? Because I know it like takes over life at some point, and it probably does as a young kid, but when does the actual competition and competitiveness get serious? It's about winning.
For me, about winning was like when I was 6. But if you're talking about professional youth league level, probably 15, 16, I made the Australian team twice. So when I was 17 and when I was 18. When I was 18, I went overseas, went to America. We went to London. From there, I went to Spain. This was all when I was about 19 years old. And I spent about 10 months in Spain. And I was training with Rayo Vallecano, they were first division recently. They're back down to second division. They were second division at the time.
They're in that La Liga or whatever. I don't follow soccer or whatever, foosball.
Foosball. They're in La Liga. They're like a third Madrid team. So they're like a feeder team for Real Madrid. So if any good players come out of there, they usually get snatched up by Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid. So
you make all these teams. These teams are the best of the best in all of Australia. And how are you on those teams? Because at this point, you're 18. You're fully grown. For you, fully grown's what, 5'4"?
5'6". Come on, man.
Sorry, man. It's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a while. Either way, at that point, you're fully grown and you're quicker than everybody else.
These are the youth teams I'm making, like the under 19, like not the first grade team.
Did you play with any guys that went to go play in professional leagues?
Yeah, a few guys. And you'll find that a lot of the guys that actually made it through to the top tier weren't the most talented guys. Their head was screwed on right. They just had a better work ethic, and they were the yes, sir, no, sir, I'll do anything you want, sir kind of players, You
had definitely had your head screwed on right, and maybe you weren't yes sir, no, sir the whole time, but I can't see you being a guy that rocks the boat that much. Were you like that in soccer?
Yep. This is why skating was so valuable to me, and I truly appreciated every moment of it because it was my second time round. I was in Spain for almost a year with that team, trialing and playing. I was partying. I was chasing girls. I wasn't taking it 100% seriously. I was just relying on my talent.
Wait, you were partying?
Yeah.
What does partying mean? You were drinking?
No. I never drank, never smoked, never touched the drug. But partying for me was going out to clubs most nights, because in Europe there are clubs that are open almost every night, and just hooking up with girls, meeting girls, just being out with mates or whatever, not being home.
I guess we can call that partying, technically, a straight edge party.
Straight edge party, but not fully dedicated to what I was supposed to be there for, which was to play soccer and try to make it. I had no money. I had no agent, because back then, you're talking early 90s, there's no such thing as agents. Australia's not really renowned for soccer. Now it is, but back in the day, they'd say, "Where are you from?" I'd say Australia, and they'd be like, "They don't play soccer there." So it was hard when you got no money, no representation, and you're catching 2 buses and a train just to get to training and come home at 11 o'clock every night. And your fellow teammates don't talk to you because you're a foreigner, and they're trying to steal the boots out of your bag while you're training. And I was lonely. The only year I could honestly say that I was lonely. This is before email and everything, so I would write letters back to people in Australia, friends in Australia, just so that one day I could come home and have a letter from someone. You know, I was truly lonely. And yeah, I overstayed my visa, and I had to do the army because I was born now. It was compulsory army, military service. So I said, no, I'm done with this. I'm going back home.
So that was the deal, because I read there was visa issues, but it was like, hey, you can stay here, but you're going to have to join the army. And you're not guaranteed that you're going to play pro soccer, but you still have to join the army. So
that's right.
You're like, hey, I'm getting the fuck out of here.
That was it. It was 2 years army. And like I said, I was still training. I was selected on the train-on squad, but I wasn't selected in the first team. So there's no guarantees. You have to work your way up, and how long that takes. And the army can relocate you wherever they want. They can send you to whatever city they want in Spain. So I might not even be in Madrid. So I was missing home. I was young. I was a little bit immature. Everything together. I was 19 years old, and I was just like, I just want to go back to Australia. I was miserable. And that's what I did. And I went back to Australia, and I played First Division State League in Australia, which is a good level. And I got a job at a sports store. I was trying to study. I did calligraphy. That's a dying art.
You do high school, then you take some classes at university, like calligraphy and art?
College courses, I guess you could call them. Like, I wanted to do graphic design back in the day, but it was way too expensive. And I just said, I'll do calligraphy while I'm working, and I'll play soccer. So I got a job at a sports store. The ad said sports store. I was like, that's great. I love it. You know, I'll work in a sports store, no problem. And it was actually a skateboard shop. It was called Skateboard World. And they sold skates, skateboards, pads, ice skates, everything. And I didn't know anything about it. My job interview was to put together a skateboard, and I put the trucks the wrong way. Like, I just had no idea. I didn't even dress for the occasion. And the guy, he said I had good character, I had good personality, and he hired me for 3 months to see how I went, and he liked me, so he kept me. And that's the only reason that I started skating.
First, there's a couple things. When you say that you were worried about winning at age 6, were you an ultra competitive person in soccer the whole time and like just totally distraught when you lost?
In anything.
It's one of those things where soccer, you're going to have more wins than losses if you're on a good team. Skating, to get a win is a lot harder than team sport wise, because it's like one dude gets it. So you were devastated every time you didn't get a podium skating too?
Yeah, for a while there, because there was a while I was
on fire.
I was on the podium, and if I didn't, even if I got third, it was, or second at some point. But also, you're in the hands of the judges.
Yeah.
That's the difference between a result-based sport where you score goals or you run past the line first. You can't deny that. Or a subjective sport like skating, ice skating, figure skating, anything where there's judges involved. That was a whole other thing that I had to deal with. But yeah, I'm so competitive that I feel better not losing than actually winning, if you know what I mean. Like, when I won a major contest, I was more relieved that I didn't lose.
One thing I did notice with you was, good or bad, you really didn't seem to have that much emotion, and I could never see you being the dude just pounding his chest after a win. But like I said, I missed that amazing run that you were on. But skating starts around 93, and you're back in Australia, and you're working at this shop, and
At this point, is the dream of soccer still alive? I mean, I know you're still playing in a good league, but you're probably 19, 20 at this point, and I would think if you haven't been found, it's hard to make it in the world of soccer if you want to actually eat and pay bills.
Yeah, so that was the issue. That you couldn't play full-time soccer at the time. You had to work as well. And I was 23 when I started skating, and I was skating and playing soccer at the same time. And if you know a bit about both sports are very taxing on your body. And I was getting smashed with skating because I didn't know how to fall. I didn't know how to ride properly.
You didn't wear pads or helmets in the beginning, did you?
I didn't wear helmets.
Okay.
I eventually wore knee pads. And then eventually, once I started going bigger, I was smashing my elbows and all the rest of it. So I started wearing more padding. But yeah, it came to a point where I was like, I'm getting smashed. My body's just getting destroyed and I'm running so much of soccer. And then I had a run in with the coach. We had a Brazilian coach who was a real asshole. And he took me off one game and I just said, I'm not coming back. And there was other things before that. But anyway, I just said, I'm not coming back. And he said, okay, whatever, I'll see you on Tuesday. But my best friend knew that I wasn't going to come back anymore. And I didn't. I got an offer to go to the first X Games. I took it. And that was it. I stopped soccer for...
You had only been skating for like a year.
A year and a bit, yeah, a year and a half. I met Chris Edwards the year before. He came down to Bondi to ride. He was my idol. He was the one I always wanted to skate like. I appreciated a lot of other skaters, but he was the one that, you know, when you see someone, you're like, yes, that's how I want to ride. He was that guy for me. We had Tom Fry in Australia. We had Scott Crawford, Manuel Baliris. Actually, Manuel Baliris was more like that mold as well. I love the way he skated. But there's just something about the way those two skated that that's how I want to skate. And that's how I based myself on. But I didn't learn the basics. I just jumped in with my athleticism and whatever and just started learning the hard stuff without learning the basics. So I got good tricks, but very sketchy all over the place.
Was it like people watching like, he's going to die, like, oh, he got it?
Yeah, Scotty and his crew, they were from the northern beaches of Sydney. They would say, like, this guy is good, but he's not going to last 2 years. Because I would see it as a failure if I didn't land the trick. Like, if I went for a big 900 or 720 or whatever, I would put my feet down no matter where my axis was. So if I was leaning back, I would try to roll out of it. Instead of bailing, being smart, saving yourself for another go, I would try to land everything no matter what position I was in. And I took some horrendous falls. Lucky I'm compact and I'm a bit strong. I took those falls. I just kept going and going. But a skateboarder that I worked with said to me, look, man, you're going to have to wear bigger pads on your knees and you're going to have to learn how to bail.
Yeah.
Once I learned how to bail and how to like, okay, that doesn't feel right, pull out, try it again. That's when my skating progressed.
In the beginning, everything's kind of street-based. I would think you might have a mini ramp here or there. 6-8 months into it, you find a vert ramp. And for me, when I look at vert versus street, I always looked at vert and I looked at it based off of you as it's more of an athlete-based sport where if you are not in top physical shape, other than maybe a couple outliers here and there, but not many people cannot be in top shape, and you are like a tank. I mean, I would think you're always in shape, and just having that strength in your core, whether you knew it or not, just like had you set up to have the body type to be a great skater.
That's great. A great question, because you're right. We work our core, our back, our leg muscles, and we don't even realize it. By snowboarding, by skiing, by rollerblading, by skateboarding, we're getting so strong with certain muscles that we don't even realize it because it's just an activity we're doing every day. I used to skate 3-4 hours a day if I could, more. And yeah, I had a really strong core. All that spinning comes from that. You know, my fitness. When I skated that first X Games, I had to skate like 6 or 7 times in that final in a row. And I basically did that because I was so fit. I could do it. This whole soccer thing I brought over to skating helped me as an athlete.
Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break. And the first one up is Evo. And all winter I've been telling you that there is no better place to get your ski and snowboard gear. And that's true. The folks at Evo stores in Denver, Seattle, Portland, and Whistler live and breathe the sports they sell. And now that it's spring, it's time to think about your bike. And whether you need service or a brand new bike, Evo has you taken care of. They have the best brands, offer great service, and they know what they're talking about. If bike isn't your thing, Evo is also the best one-stop shop for surf and wake. If you can't make it to a store, Evo.com offers the best user experience in action sports, free shipping on orders of $50 or more, and a low price guarantee. You can find out all about the brands, the events, Evo Trip, and a whole lot more over at Evo.com. My next sponsor is another iconic Seattle brand. I'm talking about Stanley. Remember that green steel bottle that your grandpa took to the mountains? The one that kept his coffee hot all day long? That's a Stanley. And since 1913, they have been the pioneers of retaining cold and heat. No product works for 48 hours like a Stanley. And to celebrate camping and drinking season, I convinced the folks at Stanley to let me give 30% off site-wide to show listeners. It's a limited time offer. To get it, you need to head over to stanley-pmi.com, buy a growler, some pint glasses, a legendary bottle, whatever, and enter the code POWEL30, that's all one word with the number 30, at checkout, and you will get 30% off site-wide. Those are my sponsors.
So you get that invite to the X Games. It's probably not an email back in 1995. And are you getting a letter, a call, and are you like, what the fuck is this Extreme Games? And sure, I've got nothing better to do. How much is it going to cost me?
I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is it? What do you mean? I can't just leave work. What is these Extreme Games? And someone explained it to me as like the Olympics for these kind of sports. I was like, I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't have enough money. And then Scotty Crawford, he hurt himself and I took his place. So that's how that turned out. He was street skating and broke his tailbone, and then I took his place and I went over with Tim Ward, Emmanuel Baleros, Paul Molina, Steve Cairo, and Matt Salerno as well, and a bunch of Aussies on a trip that we didn't know what to expect. It was the blind leading the blind, but it was the best year of my skating career. If you look back at what you look at and you enjoyed the most, probably that first year.
You guys are just a bunch of dudes who are skating ramps in Australia. I don't think you're competing that much over there because I don't even know if that exists.
Nah, there was, one contest a year or something.
And then you get over here and you get to the X Games and that Extreme Games that first year. I mean, it was built on rollerblading. I know rollerblading, the brand, put a lot of money in to make sure that the sport was going to be grown in that respect. And there was about 10 different events. I mean, you skated in what, vert, singles, doubles, triples, downhill. I mean, how many events was inline involved with?
So they had the street, and on the street, I think they may have had best trick. And then on the vert, they had the vert, and then they had the high air, and then they had the downhill speed racing.
And you did that, right?
Yeah, a bunch of us did that because they needed numbers, and they said they came down to the ramps, and they said, do any of you guys want to do like the downhill? So me and Arlo and Brooke, we all did it, and it was fun, but it was scary. Every race had like some casualties.
They had pay blocks and stuff, and people were just getting destroyed.
Yeah, because you didn't know the turns, because we never ran the course or anything. They just said go, and then we're just flying down this hill, and they had this guy, you always got the local hero. He was called Captain Midnight, and he would wear like full leathers with a motorbike helmet, and he'd have like the handbrakes with the wire attached to the back of his skate somehow as his brakes. That guy, I think, crashed every race. Me and Brooke had to jump him on one of the things because he smashed into the hay bales, and we just jumped him and kept going.
At that point, Rossi's, that's the brand that you're skating on, but in the beginning you're skating for free. And are you even getting paid when you're at the X Games, or do you buy your own plane ticket and you're kind of investing in yourself for that one?
So we hit America, and I had $400 to my name, and Manuel Baleros, I think, had $400 as well.
And that's Australian money, so it's like $200 American.
That was Australian money. So I basically had to do well at the X Games, which was the first event, to be able to go to the next event, which was the Chicago ASA, which was the first ever ASA, and then go to the Portland NIS and win that to be able to buy a ticket to go to the next event. And this happened for months.
And yet, for the next 4 years, you're on the podium, it seems like, every week. But you're pretty much gambling. You roll over here without any money, you get your plane ticket, and you're like, I've got to make it happen. At X Games, you get second, which is huge. And when do people start talking to you about actually paying you? Because when you're dealing with Roses in Australia, you're not dealing with the main headquarters of the brand. I would think you're dealing with a distributor. And most Australians deal with distributors for a while until they get picked up and be on the global team. I'm sure it happens fast for you, but when do you start seeing money from sponsors in rollerblading?
So, 95, I skated for free, like you said. Rosie's actually picked up a couple of my tickets, I think, towards the finals for the ASA in New York and NIS in Venice. But I wasn't getting paid. And Rollerblade offered me a nice contract. K2 every year would hit me up. Do you want to come and ride? Do you want to come and ride? I just didn't like their skates at the time. Those street skates, you couldn't ride them on Vert at the time. And the guy from Razors came to me, the owner, I forget his name.
Andy.
He came to me in 95 after the big expo in Chicago, after the ASA finished, and he said, Cesar, my name is Andy, this is Razor skates. And he showed me the photo of them. They weren't even like made, I don't think, yet. And he said, I want to offer you this much. I'd love it if you could ride for us. I said, look, I love Rosie's and I just want to ride for Rosie's. And he said, are they paying? I said, no. They might, but, I just love skating. I'm a bit weird like that. And I remember looking at the Razor skates at the time, and they looked a bit cheap. I mean, they obviously got a lot better, but the same thing happened for Hyper. Like, I rode FR wheels. Once I met the guys and I rode the wheels, I asked Nick from FR if I could ride. He didn't poach me. He didn't chase me.
You wanted to be on brands that you wanted to represent.
That I liked.
FR was one thing, and other people would offer you money, and you stayed true to you. You can do that because at this point, I'll call it the trend of inline skating, because when you look back on it in history, it was a big trend that became an activity for some, but the first 7 years, it was a trend and it had exponential growth. I don't think any action sport's ever seen that much coverage before, and that's an underlying problem that we can discuss if we get into it. But your world has totally changed. From 94, you're like a soccer player who's not going to be a soccer player anymore, and that sucks for you. But you also find skating, and now when ESPN is pitching the X Games, they're talking about Vert gold medalist Tony Hawk. We're going to see Cesar Mora. And you're in the sentence with the biggest athletes in the world. I'm sure you walk by newsstands and you see your friends on the covers of magazines. Was that surreal to you because it wasn't the plan?
That was what was so beautiful about it. It wasn't a plan. There wasn't a set path. We just went over there to do what we do in Australia, which is just skate and skate and skate and skate. That's what we did. We went over there. We made really good friends. People helped us out, looked out for us, let us stay at their houses, whatever. And we just skated. And things came about because of what you mentioned, all the business opportunities, the trend that it became. It was the fastest growing sport in the world at that time.
There was 34 million people doing it at one point.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, you just look on any boardwalk, any street, there were skaters everywhere. Recreational skaters, hockey skaters, everything. And a sport is healthy when you see the casuals doing it. Once you stop seeing the casuals doing it, then the sport's dying down a little bit. So I had a lot of offers from companies. So I basically separate companies into like McDonald's or mum and pop shops, right? So something that's true to your heart is the mum and pop shop. The ones that they might not be big corporate companies, but they're doing it for the right reasons. They're trying to make, and their family, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rossi's to me was that kind of company because they were a small company from Montebelluna in Italy. I liked that vibe. I didn't want to skate for rollerblade because they were so big. Hyper Wheels was the same thing. Hyper Wheels to me was like McDonald's for wheels. I didn't like the quality of the wheels. Where FR, even though they couldn't pay me, the wheels were great, and they gave me my own pro wheel, which to me meant more than paying me per month for some wheel that's not going to work. And so what would happen was in 95, Boss Bearings is owned by Hyper. And in order to have Boss Bearings as a sponsor, you have to ride Hyper. That was the deal with everyone back then. But I said no. I said, I love your bearings. If you don't want to sponsor me, I'll just buy the Swiss bearings from the shop. I don't care. And they said, okay, well, you will be the only guy that's not sponsored with Hyper and Boss at the same time. I said, thank you. And every Wednesday they would send a guy, a really nice guy who I became friends with later, to where I was staying in Huntington Beach to pick me up every Wednesday afternoon to take me out to dinner, to try to get me to ride for Hyper.
It's crazy that it was that serious back then.
Yeah.
They were trying to recruit you and trying to win you over because in your big years of skating, I mean, you had the brands that were your core, but the other sponsors you have. I think you're on the Gap, maybe. I'm not sure. Levi's.
Levi's.
So you're on Levi's. What other big money brands were you on? Some non-endemic sponsors that you had?
We had Broadband Sports. Now, they gave us a laptop each. They were a sports website. They sponsored Kornikova, Dennis Rodman, Kelly Slater. So the top of each sport. And basically, they would give you a laptop, they'd give you a website, and they'd send out a film guy and a camera girl to come out and film every event you do and then load it on the website. And that's where you get your fan mail through. And so that was really cool. Another side thing. Levi's clothing was excellent. It was a really good sponsor. Very good people, and obviously an established company, for a long time.
And you had perks where they take you down to get 100-year-old jeans or some crazy stuff like that with them, I think.
I got some at home. Yeah, they've got like $100,000 jeans in their special wardrobes in San Francisco that are like from the 1800s or something, whenever they created the company.
And at the peak of your career, I mean, you don't have to give me a number, and I probably know a little bit of what you make just based off of your skate sponsor, but are you making like $500,000 a year between contests and sponsors at the height of your rollerblading?
No one was. No rollerblader was making $500,000 a year.
Not even Chris Edwards?
Chris probably made more than that before all this happened. By 97, 98, I don't think he was making that money at all from rollerblade. I know he did make a lot of money initially. He was getting royalties from 4 different skates.
Yeah.
So yeah, apart from Chris, if you're talking about like through 98, 99, 97, 2000, yeah, there was no one making $500,000.
But could you make a couple $100,000 being a rollerblader?
Yeah, there was only a few of us that were.
But you're the best. I mean, I'm not talking to the dude who got 9th place all the time.
Well, sometimes the guy that got fifth in the world, had no sponsor. That's how weird the sport was.
I would also blame that on the guy who got 5th. I mean, if he doesn't have a personality and he's not marketable, then that's why he has no sponsors. But there were some guys that could have had sponsors, but just weren't professional. It's a job, and you have to put some work in like that to make it happen.
That's true. And that was a big thing with rollerblading, because this is what I said at the beginning of the interview. This is my second time round. So I took this opportunity and I ran with it, and I appreciated every second of it. I appreciated my position. I didn't want to be a role model. Then I started seeing kids not wearing helmets and saying, "Cess, look at me, I'm going to do a backflip." I'm like, whoa. So I had to start wearing a helmet. I had to start being a role model to people that I didn't expect to in the beginning. But I understood it. And I understood people are flying you around and they're putting you in hotels. That stuff's expensive. You better represent them properly. You do an interview, just wear the stupid hat. Like, it's not a big deal. You're doing photos, wear the shirt. If you're going to do a rocket and the camera guy's taking you from underneath, put a sticker on your ass. That's a poster right there. So I understood that. I understood the responsibility. I understood that I had to sign every single autograph, and I loved it. I loved meeting all the fans. I wrote back to every single fan mail. I understood that. There's some kids that were skating that they were just young, and they didn't get it. And they were very punk or very street or very whatever, and they blew their chances. I don't want to name names or anything, but there's a lot of kids. If that happened to me when I was younger, like what I did with soccer, I probably would have stuffed around and maybe not made the most of it like I did. But I was a little bit older. It was my second time around, and I really appreciated every part of what I was doing.
Well, it would be hard not to appreciate it, because I know you put in hard work for a year and a half beforehand, and then you just go on a tear from like 96 to 2000. You are absolutely dominant, and there's a lot of contests we could talk about, but I'm not going to talk about many. There was, I think, an MTV contest in 97, and that was in Austin, Texas. Was that the one where the Offspring played and then wouldn't play?
Yeah. Besides that was a really cool event. They had the outdoor snowboard jump thing, and even though it was really hot, they still had it out there. We skated on stage with Wu-Tang Clan and Real Big Fish and a whole bunch of others. The Offspring were rehearsing, and I was waiting for them to play All I Want. Not them, but just to use their song.
Yeah.
And the producer was like, what's the delay? Because everyone else got their songs played, but I just wanted Offspring. I wanted that song.
They were going to play them live for you?
No. They were going to allow us to use their songs while we skated.
Okay. Which
promotes them as well also, I guess. So anyway, it was up for my run, and I was waiting. The producer's waiting, and he's got his little earphone in. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, they're not going to let us use the song. I said, why? And the producer literally said they don't want to lend their song to a gay industry.
Wow.
That got me and a bunch of rollerbladers off Offspring very quick. That was just disgusting. They were right there with us. Like, literally, we were warming up to them the whole day beforehand. And that was just a little eye-opener to where our sport stood in a lot of places where we went. You know, we had to face a lot of things like that.
Was that the first time you had seen it in like a major mainstream way?
No. I'd seen it with skateboarders. I'd seen it with other things, but this was a big one. And then I won that event, so I had to go up and get the award, which was fine. And then Pat Parnell came up to me and he's like, Cess, this is a big moment for rollerblading. Kill it. I'm like, shit, I didn't have a speech planned or anything. I didn't know what to say, so I just went up. Someone threw a water bottle at me. I said, that's great, well done. And straight away, everyone started booing. So instantly, I had to turn this crowd around. There was about 10,000 people. So by the end of the speech, I just thanked them all, and they all thanked me, and it all came out looking good. But yeah, it's little moments like that where you realize the pecking order.
Yeah. But at the same time, outside of when you're at those contests, the media around rollerblading at that point is still really, really strong. And can you feel your celebrity building? Like when you go to the airport, are you getting noticed and signing autographs? Because it's one of those sports where people see your face.
Yeah, it's weird because, you know, in Australia, you can go around anywhere. It's fine, you know. Even if they recognise you, it's no big deal. Back then, anyway, it's gone a little bit loopy now with celebrity. But I remember the 95 inline vert finals was played on the same time as the Stanley Cup. And we got more viewers on ESPN than the Stanley Cup did that year.
Wow.
People just loved it. And yeah, it was funny because I spent a bit of time in New York because of FR and skating late back home at, 1, 2 in the morning. And some bouncer outside a club would be like, yo, Cesar Mora. I'm like, how the hell does he recognize me? And then me and Blake Dennis and Toby Heslop were in Brookstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in one of those shops in the middle of like Indiana or Minnesota or Nashville. I can't remember where we were. And we were just on the massage chairs. And these Asian girls were just staring at us. And then one of them just goes, hey, you're that Australian guy, aren't you? I'm like, oh, my God. Just in the middle of nowhere. And this happened a lot because, like you said, it's on ESPN. And ESPN was on. If you go to any pub, any sports bar, there was a Pizza Hut that me and my girlfriend were at, and my winning runs were playing while we were eating pizza.
It makes it a layup when you get home. It's like, boom. Well, I guess if it's your girlfriend, it's one thing. But if it's a date. And then going into 98, you haven't put it all together at the X Games yet, but it's your Olympics and you're a perfectionist and don't want to lose ever. That's the year you blow everybody's mind with the first 1080. What kind of pain goes into learning a trick like that? Because when you learned it, I don't think you have resi ramps or foam like the kids do today.
No, I never ever used a resi ramp or a foam pit. Because once I used that, I felt the ramp was too hard, like the contrast of it. Something so soft and then something so hard. So I'd always learn it on the ramp. Do or die, smash myself, get up, learn it again. So I'll explain quickly the progression. In 95, 96, I used to skate a certain way. I used to pump a certain way. I used to push my hands on my legs and pump up, do the tricks all laid out, a lot of flippy stuff, airs like all gangly. So I filmed myself all of 96 when we did the tours of Colombia and Peru and Argentina with Rosies. So I would film all that. And then I looked at it and I was horrified. My skating looked so ugly. There were parts of my skating that I was like, oh my God. So I changed it. And one of the hardest things to do was to go to Vertex, to the skate park I was at, and just change my pumping style that I've been doing for a few years now, just not put my hands on my legs. And that was a big jump into 97. Once I went into 97, I had different tricks. I had different style. Everything was more compressed, more tucked up. There wasn't that ugly pumping style. So going into 98, everything was a lot tighter. And that's the year I landed a 1080 in 94, but wild style, bottom of the ramp. Landed it once, rolled out of it, landed it another time, and just smashed myself and didn't do it again till 98. But 98, I had my spins straighter. The thing was before, my spins were like flippy. So when you're doing a 1080, I got lost. But when I was doing the straight spins, that's when I got the 1080. And that all came about because we're at the Goodwill Games in New York, And Matt Salerno went around telling everyone that he could do a 900. And we're like, do it. So at the break, I think it was Pat Parnell said, okay, everybody hang around. Matt Salerno is going to do his new trick. He's going to do a 900, forwards 900. So that's forwards, landing forwards, 2.5 rotations. And he wouldn't do it because he couldn't do it at the time. So just for fun, we all just got on the ramp on the break and just started trying to do it. I was spinning it so easily, but I couldn't land forwards. Mike Budney goes, yeah, if you land backwards, it's a 1080. I'm like, all right. I just went up, spun it, and landed it like a 720. And I was like, was that 720 or 1080? And everyone just jumped on me. And that's how that came about. It's a heavy spin, heavy rotation, heavy whip. When you miss it, you slam big time. It was like live or die by the sword, because if I did it and I landed it, I would usually win. But if I did it, it was a big risk. I didn't land it. You could drop down to 10th very easily.
Now I'm going to take a final sponsor break. And Spy Optic is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Yes, 25 years Spy has been crushing it with innovation and style. Based out of Southern California, Spy is a collective of athletes, artists, and product designers who live and breathe action sports. To celebrate this 25th anniversary, Spy is re-releasing the MC3, an ode to Jeremy McGrath's original MC sunglass. The Dirty Mo 2 is a sick update to Dale Jr.'s original Dirty Mo, and the Scoop 2 celebrating Spy's OG Scoop sunglass, which started it all. To get 20% off your Spy purchase, head on over to spyoptic.com, place your order, and then at checkout, enter the code TPM20, that's all one word. To find out more about the products and the brand, head on over to spyoptic.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing the Northwest's best beer since 2006, and they encourage everyone to go drink some of their beer outside. Why? Because 10 Barrel is all about the outside. They live and breathe the snow and bike lifestyle, and they support it with events, sponsored athletes, movie projects, and more. Next time you're at the store, pick up some 10 Barrel. And to find out more about the beer that supports action sports, the events, and their pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, and now we'll get back into the podcast.
In 99, you take the silver at X Games. I think that's the year you landed 1260. So for like the inception of the sport, there is no one that has close to the amount of wins and podiums as you, I wouldn't think. I didn't really do the math, but everything's first, second. From 95 to about 2000. In 99 is when you get on K2, I think.
99, I started on K2.
K2 wanted you on the program for a long time, and you weren't going to go over there. But there was a lot of pressure on Matt Lacrosse, who was the K2 team manager at that time, to get you on the team, because at that point, K2 had a CEO named Rich Rodstein, and his son was really into action sports at that point. And he wanted a few different athletes on the program. And when I say a few, there was two. And he wanted Cesar Mora and he wanted Dennis McCoy. And sure as shit, that happened. And when K2 came to you, did they just throw you a bunch of money?
No, basically, Matt Lacrosse would do the phone call that I'd get every year. He'd be like, hey, how you doing? How you cruising? You happy? What are you doing? You going to come to K2 or what? And at that time, I was having issues with Roces because I didn't want to leave Roces. I didn't like the Fifth Elements. I always liked the Majestic 12s. The Fifth Elements just felt big and clunky. And then I felt all the skates were just going so big and clunky. They hurt my feet. I didn't want to ride those on Vert. Also, they had a lot of shirts where they had that cockroach on it. So I'm winning a lot of contests with a cockroach on my shirt. I just wanted some cool designs. They wouldn't do anything. It was like they were scared to break out of their little mold that they had going on. And they weren't paying any bonuses. I also tried, not for myself, but for all skaters, to get a pro skate, which back then was unheard of at Roces. Because I spoke to a few skateboarders and I found out what the guys from DC Shoes get per pair of shoes. And so I worked it out that if we could get like a miserable $10 off a pair of skates sold, which is a $400 pair of skates, that would be good for us, you know, or pay us some sort of bonus for doing interviews or being on front pages of magazines or something like that. And they wouldn't agree to any of it. And it just became a battle, a tug of war. And I was like, I don't want to keep battling. I don't like these skates, these Fifth Elements. And I'm getting offered a lot more money at somewhere else. It wasn't about the money, though. but the money did help. I spoke to him at lacrosse and I said, look, man, I like you. I like what you stand for. I've always liked K2, but I've just never been able to ride any of their skates. Like the street skates, you can't ride those on Vert. He said, we'll make you a skate, whatever you want. I said, what if I can't ride the skates? He goes, just wear the stickers, wear our shirts until we make you a skate that you can ride. I was like, here's a company that's bending over backwards to like try to make something happen. And here's another company that's not going forward.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't want to leave Rossi's. I've always got a soft spot for him, but I had to do what I had to do. And I did it. And a lot of people were like, what? How the hell is he going to skate K2s? This is a joke. I worked with Matt, worked on a couple of designs. He sent out about 4 or 5 pairs of skates. I put aside the ones that would definitely know. I worked on 2 pairs. I think the Style Bobs and the Kings. Worked on those. And he did it. I remember the first time I rode them, I went to Vertex and I had a little crew of guys that would come just to watch me fall on my ass. And it took me about 3 runs and the skates were fine. And they were comfortable and they were small and they were perfect. And that was it. And I can say that I won more in 98, but my best year of skating where I actually skated the best, where all my tricks came together, 4s, 900s, 1080s, 1260s, all the rest of it, was 99. Then I broke my arm the year after that.
You break your arm and your shoulder and wrist at the Melbourne Planet X Games?
Yeah.
Before I talk about your devastating arm injury, I believe there was an injury that you had mentioned to me once where you were at a contest and you're getting ready to drop in a vert ramp and there was a TV wire that got caught around your skate and almost killed you. No one really thinks about that happening, but it does.
Yeah, that happened a couple of times. And then there was the Gravity Games in Cleveland, up where the skaters were. It's just a wooden floor. They spilt all the drink and my skate went one way and my groin went the other way. I had to skate finals like straight after. I could barely walk. There was the K2 Challenge they had at Woodward. They had like a high air contest, a street contest, a best trick contest. They gave out big money for this weekend and all the skaters stayed at Woodward. So it was a really fun weekend. And I'd won the high air and I won this unique thing they did, not a 60-second run. It was just a 30-second run. So basically you just jam your biggest tricks into one run. So I survived a weekend of skating high airs, doing runs, doing everything, plus sessioning with everyone up in Lot 8. I was on the coping with my pads and my helmet in my hand on my skates, and they announced my name. As I went to drop in to go down, I just ate shit. Fell straight to the flat, smashed my knee. I couldn't skate for a week. My knee was open and swollen. It was just the stupidest thing.
And they were just announcing you to get your prize or something?
To go down and get my prize, yeah, in front of everyone. And I hadn't hurt myself the whole weekend.
As embarrassing as it gets. But your worst injury happens at that Melbourne Planet X Games, and that one is your arm and your wrist, and we don't really need to talk about the injury, but I remember seeing x-rays and it was a terrible break. I look at that injury as one that probably shifted maybe your mentality of how you skate, your balls maybe.
100%.
You know, that was before I came to the picture. I came in right after this injury, and I saw Cesar Mora that was a skater who could make finals and could get 4th to 7th every once in a while, depending on who was there. He might get a 2nd. You could just see it in your face that you were definitely older than everybody else, and I think that factors into it too, that you get older and you realize that you got hurt once and it takes a long time to heal and you don't want to get hurt again. Could you see a different athlete from that injury on?
Yeah, completely. It just changed completely. It's a change of the times as well. So the younger skaters were coming up and doing new things. Like the Yasutoko brothers were starting to dominate in 99, 2000, 2001. They were truly dominating. Everyone's throwing double flat spins, double backflips now. In your life, you go through a stage where you can't be broken. You're Superman. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're invincible. That's usually the beginning of everyone's career and what they do. Skateboarders, bike riders, whatever. They go through those first few years of experimenting with tricks and smashing themselves and getting up and doing it again. And that's that courage. It's not being dumb. He's just got more courage.
It's balls. You don't have as much to live for, I would say. So you're not thinking about other things in life. It's just like you're thinking about landing a trick and that's it. And if you don't land it, you're going to get up and do it again.
That's it. You don't think of consequences. You don't think of anything after that. After you get to a certain point where you just don't have that inner drive to do those crazy, stupid stunts anymore. Like, you just don't have it. And when you don't have that, you start playing it more safe. I was still on the up. I was still progressing. I was still throwing big stuff. But after that arm, it made me think twice. I was like, I've got a rod in my arm now. And if it breaks again with the rod in my arm, they're going to have to go in and re-break my arm. And it freaked me out. I didn't know how much it could take, because which doctor has experimented on how much damage a thing in your arm can take when you're skating? They don't know. It's just a new thing. I didn't want to break it again.
So you turned into a total pussy, Cesar.
Well,
I'm kidding completely.
A little bit.
You were still throwing crazy tricks.
But I wasn't prepared to go to that next level where I was going to smash myself, maybe break my neck doing double backflips, doing whatever. You know what I mean?
No, you would have your one big air, like your second hit would be a huge air. Boom! Cesar Mora, but you wouldn't do your huge tricks that big anymore.
No, well, I started getting injuries, and I had this hip injury that I've got right now. This all started back then, but I didn't know it. There's nerve damage and all the rest of it, but whatever. At the time, I didn't know it. I would just skate through it. Afterwards, I would be limping for a while, then I'd be okay. It never stopped me doing anything, but now it's actually stopped me doing stuff. So we're paying for our sins later in life for what we used to do back then. And I used to see all the BMX guys, they were wrecked. I remember seeing Matt Hoffman with a walking stick at the 96 X Games, and then he was riding. And I didn't want to end up like that. I never wanted to end up like that. I always wanted to be able to come out of skating and be as fit and have longevity, you know, with my body, with everything. My mind intact as well. A lot of those guys, they got hit too many times in the head. And I got concussed, I think it was 2001, because the ramp was a bit dodgy. My foot went in one of the seams and I got knocked out. I got concussed. I went to the hospital in California. I was at ASA finals. It's things like that that prevented me from like pushing next level tricks, next level heights, everything. I started playing it a bit more safe. I was getting more injuries. Things were catching up with me.
I mean, if you're one of those guys that are injured a lot throughout your career and you got injured at 18 and you came back at 19 and were strong, you'd be used to it. But when you have your first injury towards the end of your career and you're an older skater as it is, yeah, I can see where it's like you're going to think about everything. And that's kind of where I step into the whole mix, because Matt Lacrosse had a killer team. There was like 12 athletes on K2 and everything was going great, but then the budgets were going to be cut because of sales, and Matt wasn't having it, and he left. So there was a period at K2 of about 8 months where there, I believe, was no communication between the brand and the athletes at all. And do you remember that point?
I remember I sensed certain things, and so I signed a 5-year contract on the money I was on. I knew I had to do that, and luckily I did.
You were very lucky because you, Sean Robertson, and Kelly Matthews made that move. Everyone else, 9 of those 12, none of those guys got responses from K2. So I came into the job with a lot of pissed off people. And I think that's where the whole podcast starts, of me picking you up at the airport. But we did get to know each other pretty well. We spent a lot of time together on the road. I always found you to be an interesting and opinionated dude. You're always cool to me, but here are the few things that stand out to me. When we first met, the first thing I remember you selling me on was vert skating, and you were telling me how vert skating was going to be the future of the sport and that we needed to keep investing in vert skating. When I look at that statement now, I can't say it's wrong because the whole sport, vert, street, everything's kind of gone under a little bit, but I never saw it that way. But do you still believe that from back then?
Well, what lasted longer in the X Games and the Gravity Games?
Well, I feel that the loss of having vert in X Games is detrimental to the whole sport. But I looked at it as a vert ramp is intimidating, man. If you get someone out there and think they're going to skate a vert ramp and they try it, it's not really attainable. But seeing you skate gets people to buy skates and just try skating.
It's like a gateway drug. I don't care if you ride vert or street. A lot of people started skating, they've told me, because they saw me ride at the X Games or whatever. But they're street skaters. That's what gets them into the sport. That's where I was going with that, I think, more.
Second observation from the road about you was you used to always tell me, and maybe not in these words, but you used to always talk about my weight, whether it was pinching my belly, asking me if I needed to wear a shirt when we went swimming.
It was all good fun.
I know. And then towards the end, you wouldn't skate anything concrete on our tours, But I attribute that to the arm. It's like, why skate anything like that and risk getting hurt just for the 12 kids that are there?
Oh, you mean like skate parks and that?
Yeah.
Yeah. One was because of the injuries, and two, I'm not as good as the other guys on park. I'm just not a street skater. I hadn't done it for a long time. And so I'd rather film or just encourage the other guys to do it. Because when you go somewhere, as you know, from a marketing point of view, people have like an image of who you are, what you do, whatever.
Yeah.
And this has happened to me where I've seen this name come to this skate park and skate like crap. And I'm like, what the hell? I thought he was a pro. I never wanted to leave that impression. You put a vert ramp in front of me, the worst vert ramps in the world I've ridden. I'm telling you, where the coping's falling off. And I've tried to do the best shows I could to leave the best impression possible for Vert and for myself. And I wasn't going to do that on little skate parks where I was probably wary of my arm. I was a bit injured. And I'm just not comfortable because I hadn't skated skate parks or streets for a long time. They pay me to be a vert skater at K2. And that's why I didn't want to hurt myself on the concrete bowls or anything else. And then I couldn't do a contest. I couldn't do an event.
Totally makes sense. You were super into BMWs. I think you had one back then. Do you still have one?
I still do. I had a show car that got broken into and all the stuff got stolen out of, but I had a good run with that one. That was a good car. And now I've just got the normal one.
You were a very talented artist. It sounds like your mom was an artist too, and your art was kind of like Alien meets anime. I mean, it was dark. There was a lot of girls. And I always figured that you would do something with art after skating, but whatever happened with your art?
So I've always drawn since I was small. I just had a knack for it and loved it. It's the one thing I could sit down for hours and do. I can't just sit down and read a book. I need to be up doing stuff. But drawing, I can actually get into it and do it. And I can draw from my head a lot. Like, I don't need to copy it. I've got a good imagination. And after skating, I completed a Cert 3 and 4 in graphic design. It wasn't what I expected. Graphic design was more robotics, more copy and paste. It was more
production stuff,
more computer. Yeah, it wasn't freestyle, freehand kind of illustration kind of stuff. So I've never used it. The entry level jobs wouldn't even pay my rent here, so I didn't even want to get into it. But I did complete the course. I did learn a lot, and it was fun. It was good, but it just wasn't for me.
And then towards your later years of skating, you were looked at as the elder statesman. I think you got second at Planet X Games towards the end and some ASA podiums. But eventually your deal ends with K2. I don't remember if I offered you a ridiculously low contract or not, because what was a couple $100,000 budget was being cut to like a $30,000 budget. And at that point, I probably did offer you something so ridiculously low it was an insult. Later in my career, I realized when you're that far apart from someone, you don't offer anything out of respect. But was it a punch in the gut when K2 kind of ended?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't unexpected. The whole industry was going that way. So it wasn't like the industry was booming and then suddenly K2 is not paying anyone to ride. Like I said before, when you stop seeing casual people riding around the street, like recreational skaters, they're the ones that are funding the industry. When people are buying a lot of recreational $400 or $500 skates, then there's money for the aggressive skates to be made. When you don't see any of those people on the street anymore, you don't see as many rollerblades at the skate parks anymore, you don't see it on TV anymore, then you know something's going on. And I wasn't surprised. And I knew they didn't have the money. And instead of writing, for, like you said, an insulting number, I'd rather just be free, ride whatever I wanted and go wherever I wanted and go from there. But it wasn't a surprise to me. And I didn't blame K2 for it at all. K2 always looked after me, always paid me on time, always flew me wherever. I remember the deal was that whoever won, if someone won from K2, we'd have to go to Benihana's for dinner. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they always came through. Like, there was never a problem. Like, it was a good time, and we did cool things. We shot cool videos, and I enjoyed my time at K2. It was a 50-50 split. My time in skating with Roces, I spent 5 years, and with K2, I spent 5 years. And they were beautiful years. I got no regrets, no bad feelings towards anyone in any company at all.
Well, you would have had a lot more money if you would have signed with K2 in the beginning, because they would have been matching all your winnings in those years that you had ridiculous win amounts. But you were a loyal person and you stuck with them, and that's great. Competitive skating wise, I think there might be a contest here or there up until about 2007 for you. But the only people in skating that are really left that can make money are the vert guys. Some guys end up in Cirque du Soleil. I think you end up doing some shows at Universal for a little bit. And what is that life like? I mean, do you look at it as a step backwards, or is it prolonging what is inevitable where you have to start your life?
We were hanging in there for as long as this wave could take us. So any shows that came up, we would do it because it was free travel to somewhere, do some shows, get paid.
And what do you get paid for like a show? $1,000 a day or something like that?
Sometimes $5,000 a weekend, sometimes $1,500 a weekend. It depends on who you're doing it for and what the event is. We also did a few tours for Kellogg's, doing stuff like that. I believe I did an anti-drug high school tour, which I really enjoyed.
When do you eventually hang up your skates for good? I mean, at that point, there's no sponsorship dollars coming in. It is all per event. So it's like you're an independent contractor who's trying to get as much work as he can. Eventually, I guess you realize you probably have to do something. And when do you say goodbye to skating?
I think 2006 was my last ASA finals. It was one of my better ones as well. I skated really well. And then after that, I was just flying myself around for a couple of years, and that gets expensive.
Yeah.
But I had the money to do it, and I would just fly myself around and do some comps and do some shows and put myself in a position where I could be hired. We're all just hanging on. And people were, like you said, going to join the circus. Other people were doing this. Other people, they had to work. It was really weird because we all got used to this lifestyle, and then suddenly it got taken away. And then what's next? What do you do?
I don't think there's any other case where you can say a sport was created and it was huge. There was 50, 60 people able to make a living as athletes throughout the industry at one point. And then not 8 years later, it's poof, gone. There's like 2 people that can make money, if that.
We grew too fast, too quickly, and we didn't know how to handle it. This was skateboard's second time round. This was BMX's second time round. And if you looked at all their representatives, you looked at all the company owners, they're all bike riders or they're all skateboarders. And the people in charge of our sport were business people that came in trying to make a quick buck and then they took off, or people that didn't have our best interests at heart. I mean, we had to resort to people like Arlo and Chris to go into bat for us and represent us in board meetings and big meetings, and they're skaters.
Do you move back to Australia? And
No, I always lived in Australia.
well, I mean, and then you traveled.
Yeah. After 2009, I was going to Europe every year. Nell Martin was looking after me, and I was staying with him. He owned a ramp company, and he would do shows around Mallorca and Ibiza and all these other places. And so I would just spend a few months of the year over there with him, and then the rest of the time running or gym. I started playing soccer again, but I wasn't skating as much. That was mainly due to injuries, not that I didn't want to. Towards the end, skating became a bit of a chore. And when your heart's not fully in it like that, it's dangerous to skate. You're going to hurt yourself.
Does your money hold out at all from skating, or are you able to take a few years off?
Well, I did okay. I invested my money in property and a few other things, but a couple of those investments went a bit wrong. And through no one's fault, just things happened and I had to start working. Yeah.
What do you do for work?
So now I work for a law firm. I'm not a solicitor, but I just do things for the law firm that I can't really go into. But yeah, that's what I do now.
Do you work with bad people? Not the lawyers, but on the other end of people you have to see, are they not good people?
Some are questionable characters.
Are there any scary situations that you get put in?
Yeah. But then you have to know how to diffuse it. You diffuse the situation once you see it's getting a little bit out of hand. But yeah, other agents have been attacked, let's say.
But they don't have guns over there in Australia, right?
They do. They're not as prominent as in America, and I don't know where they get them from. But there's more gun shootings recently than any other time in Australian history.
Well, it's probably only going to get worse based on what I've seen here, but that's another story for another time. At this point, I have a segment of the show called Inappropriate Questions that I like to shut every show down with. And I talk to someone that you know, and I have them ask 3 questions to you. In this case, I went to a kid who you were a mentor to, and you were a mentor to a ton of people. This kid's a young Australian. We had dreadlocks, a street skater. His name's Blake Dennis. Are you ready for your questions from Blake Dennis?
He knows a lot about me, so I'm a bit worried about these questions. Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Yes, so Cesar, how's it going? There's been a lot of talk over the years, and the one thing that people can't work out about you is how old you really are.
I would say as a team manager,
back then I never really knew how old he was. I don't think it was in his contract, the age. And it was something that he kept a secret from everyone because you were good friends with him. He was like a mentor to you, but he never shared that information, did he?
No, I mean, I saw his passport once or twice, but I could never remember. But he's definitely doing very good for his age. I mean, I was playing soccer with him up till a few years ago, and some of the guys we run around with are 17 years old, and he's running past them.
So how old are you, Cesar?
So I'm 48.
You're 48?
Yeah, so I started skating at 23.
And you kept that a secret from everyone. Was it just you were embarrassed that you were so much older than people?
No. Here's the way that happened. Because of marketing, there was a skater that was 28 years old, and he wasn't fit at the time or anything, and he started skating badly. And people were saying, yeah, but he's 28, he's too old. I was 25 at the time. I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to be 28 soon. From that year on, I was 25 every year. So the lady from ESPN, she interviewed me 3 years in a row, and she's like, hold on, it says you were 25. Look, I'm not even going to ask her, so it doesn't matter. You're skating wonderfully. Keep going.
Huh.
I did it more so people don't know. And if they don't know, they don't judge. And then it's easier to be marketable. It's perception. As long as I took care of myself and I was still skating good, you get away with it. So that's why I did it. And Blake saw my passport one time when we were checking in on a flight. And he was like,
You're almost 50 years old, man.
When I was at the top, I was 30. The age thing didn't matter.
We're going to go to question number 2.
If you could go back to any moment in your skating career and change it, what would it be?
I would change that trick I did to break my arm at the Planet X Games. It was the end of my run. I wasn't going to do it, and I said I'm going to do a 540 disaster to 360 in, and I didn't have enough speed or energy to do it, and I still tried it anyway, and that's where I broke my arm and my wrist. It was a stupid decision, and I should have just gotten off the ramp.
And another question related to that, is there any regret that you didn't take soccer more seriously when you were younger?
Oh, yeah. There is, because, it was such a passion for me and I was gifted at it. Where skating, I really had to work at it. Soccer, I was naturally gifted. And I didn't take the opportunity. I didn't take those chances that I tried to make for myself. And I do regret that. But in saying that, the life I've had with skating, I don't want to replace that.
Okay. But, I mean, if I told you were going to make the A squad of La Liga, of whatever team you wanted, maybe you would have to reconsider. But really, I get what you're saying there, and I'm just putting a hypothetical situation together. We're going to go to question number 3.
Cesar, I've got a lot of respect for you, and I don't want to embarrass you. And if I did, you'd probably get me back pretty good. So is there a funny story from the skating days that you'd like to share?
Okay, and then I'll ask you, when you say that he'll probably get you back pretty good, it makes me think that you've seen him get other people back before. Is that the case, that he's maybe not vindictive, but he's going to go over the top and make sure he wins?
Definitely, and a good example is my brother back in the mid-90s. I think he made a mixtape or some rap battle to Cesar, and Cesar came back and destroyed him. I think he destroyed my brother, and that's why I know never to cross Cesar.
All right, so he never wants to cross you because of a rap battle you did with your brother. Do you remember the rap song?
Yeah, of course I do.
Can you perform it for us?
No, I can't.
All right, so his question's your funniest story from your skating career.
Oh, man.
That's pretty broad. I would say the funniest thing that you saw, because you were not going to get into a ton of trouble. You were definitely older. We just found that out, a lot older. And you were going to be the reserved one, but you weren't one that was going to stop people from doing funny shit, I wouldn't think. And what's the dumbest thing you ever saw maybe some of the younger skaters or whatever do that you were just like, Jesus, I'm going to get out of here because I don't want to get in trouble with them?
There was so many times we got kicked out of a hotel for damage, for throwing mattresses into the pool from the 15th story, whatever. But I remember one time at Woodward, this kid, for a set of wheels, I think, was going to bite the head off a toad, a live toad. And he was about to do it, and Mike Budnick jumped in and said, no, that's stupid. It could have been poisonous. He could have died. Kids would do the most stupidest things for a set of wheels or stickers or a pair of skates, or it was crazy. A lot of the other stories I have, I really can't say.
Well, you've had an amazing life and times. I think the coolest part is that you fucked it up the first time around and you got a second chance. And it's crazy that you got that good, that quick. Within 2 years of starting rollerblading, you were the poster boy for the sport. So I thank you for your time, and it's good to catch up and actually know your whole story now.
It was my pleasure, and I have nothing against your weight. I think you're very cuddly. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mikey.
So that was time with Cesar Mora, and I can't tell you how important it was for me to have Cesar Mora on the K2 team when I started. I learned so much from Cesar based on him being a champion skater for years and me really knowing nothing. I was the new team manager who just wanted to talk about skiing and snowboarding. I was kind of a dirtbag and really green. I would have been bummed if I were in Cesar Mora's position when he got me as a team manager, but not Cesar. He befriended me immediately and we hung out a lot. And then a contract ends and we don't really talk anymore until the other day. And it was like things were exactly how we left them off. And the great thing about Cesar is he's happy to look back and talk about the glory days. I've interviewed other rollerbladers in the past, and you could hear the pain, anger, or frustration in their voice when talking about the end of days with sport, but there is none of that with Cesar, and that is refreshing to hear. So that was the podcast with an old friend and an all-around talented individual, Cesar Mora. Now I want to thank you for listening to the show. I want to ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. And I want to thank my great sponsors for making this thing happen. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.